All right, welcome everybody to this webinar on redefining shop floor communication. Today, this is part of our ongoing webinar series that MachineMetrics has. So please, if this is your first webinar, welcome. And if you've been on others, thank you for returning. This is an ongoing series that we have, so please be looking for others, and we'll actually be announcing our next upcoming webinar later this morning. All right, so for today, I'd like to introduce who it will be on our panel. So the person who's talking right now, this is Stacy Pease. I'm the Director of Customer Success here at MachineMetrics, and my department is responsible for working with our customers and helping them achieve their desired outcomes for using the platform. And joining me this morning is Mike Tomasi. Mike is the president and CEO of AccuRounds, which is a precision components manufacturer based here in Massachusetts, as well as Jenna Myers. And Jenna has actually been doing a qualitative research project with AccuRounds, and she's a PhD candidate in organizational studies from MIT Sloan. And so they're going to be sharing some of their perspective on the platform and really how it's helped kind of transform and support the culture at AccuRounds. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into a little bit of background information, and then we're going to get started with our questions. So just before we get started, there is a chat button that you'll see, and questions can be asked in there. And Cullen McClarty, who's another member of my team and who heads up our support team, is going to be facilitating those questions at the end of the presentation. The webinar is being recorded, and we will be sending out a link, and that link will also be available on our webpage after this. So if you wind up finding that you want to share this with any of your colleagues or things like that, that will be available. And you will be able to receive access to that as well, or the slides if you would like either of those upon request. So any questions, please put them in the chat bar. And without further ado, we'll jump into our content for today. So for our agenda, I already told you a little bit about the panelists. We're going to take a quick look at kind of what MachineMetrics is and what we do at a high level. We're going to go through and ask our panelists some different questions kind of about their process. We'll do the Q&A. And then we're going to talk about what's next, some exciting announcements and things that are coming up for MachineMetrics. All right. So MachineMetrics is manufacturing's first platform for machines. And that's very important because it really differentiates what we do within our market space. So we transform analytics into action through universal machine connectivity, cloud data infrastructure, and communication workflows that optimize machine operations. And so you can kind of see from here how we go from connecting to the devices through edge connectivity to the IoT layer where then that data is processed. And then the actual applications that our customers interact with within our product, as well as extensions into other systems. And so that's really what we do. And so we support over 100 customers worldwide. And these manufacturers have connected thousands of different machines across their global factories. And our platform is really enabling these companies to deliver the right information to the right person at the right time to improve machine performance and productivity, to increase their capacity and utilization of their equipment, and ultimately to win more business and remain competitive. A little bit about our company. So we're not your classic Silicon Valley type of startup. We've really combined world-class talent in both manufacturing and cutting-edge technologies to build our company. And we focused on solving real manufacturing problems. And this is a snapshot of our executive team. And some of you know some of us. And you can also see on the side that we've been recognized, especially in the past couple of years, for a number of different awards in the IoT space. And we've, things like Smart Manufacturing Product of the Year and so forth. So we've been getting a lot of traction with what we've been doing within the industry as well. So how do we actually do this? We really bring customers on an analytics journey. Digital transformation on the shop floor doesn't happen overnight. And so we provide you with a platform that leads our customers through this journey, starting with descriptive that really talks about what's happening, moving into diagnostics and why it's happening, predictive, what's likely to happen in the future, and prescriptive, what do you actually do about this? And I want to talk a little bit about each of these. But either way, having access to this data is very important. All right, so some of the out-of-the-box use cases that we support within the product are utilization reporting, and that comes in the form of benchmarking and performance and capacity analysis. And you can kind of see an example of a dashboard in the background here. Production reporting, so things like part performance analysis and other data about how actual individual runs went so that you can do historical and real-time comparisons. The operator interface, which is really how we inform operators when part cycle times change or when downtime is happening on the machine or other key things that are happening at the machine so that they can react. Downtime tracking, identifying both bottlenecks and areas for improvement, but also helping to trigger some of the workflows that may be around those downtimes and how to solve them. OEE performance monitoring. For those that use OEE as a key metric, we do full OEE tracking. And preventative maintenance, notifying maintenance when things are due based upon real usage. So these are some of the the different out-of-the-box use cases that we support. And so what I'd really like to do now is transition into talking about how AccuRounds has really taken these use cases and what MachineMetrics offers, and really made it their own within their facility and put it to work for them. And so we're going to move into starting our panel discussion. And so to get started, I'm going to start this first question to Mike. So Mike, the first step in adopting a platform like this is preparing for some of the cultural changes. And it's really to identify, initially, what is that culture that you're starting with so that you know how to build on it. So can you tell us a little bit about how you would describe AccuRounds culture and how it's supported and enacted on a daily basis?
Sure. Thanks, Stacy. Good afternoon, everyone. Culture isn't something that you sit back and take a vote on and kind of follow the road. We have our core values, which is the base for our culture: gratitude, excellence, team first, initiative, and trust. And there's behaviors that underlie those core values. And we strive here at AccuRounds to maintain an environment that focuses on clarity and alignment. And in the job shop environment, that's difficult when you don't have a product, you're providing a service, and things are changing constantly. So, only when you have clarity and alignment can you hold people accountable. And if you have team members that can trust one another, they're not intimidated to ask questions, to make suggestions, to address concerns. So, we've worked pretty hard for the last several years. I'm a second generation family business owner, so the culture really started with my father, who founded the company, and we've expanded on his beliefs and understanding on how to move forward. So, we had to make sure we were positioned correctly before adopting any type of machine monitoring tool to implement at AccuRounds.
Thanks, Mike. No, and that's a really great kind of segue into actually our next set of questions. So I think, this topic of cultural transformation is really important. And in particular, Jenna, who, as I mentioned, is a PhD candidate who's been working with AccuRounds, is something that she studies. And so I think it's important, and Jenna, I'm going to turn this question over to you to talk about, why is considering, the organization's culture important when taking on, a change or implementing new technology? And what is research shown, both, maybe your own as well as some others, about, what that process really looks like within organizations?
Sure. So hi, everyone. Good to be here. As Stacy mentioned, I've been conducting some research with AccuRounds, and I'll share some insights from that, but also want to talk about the latest research on organizational culture and technology that's coming from some of my colleagues at MIT and elsewhere. So Stacy, like you said, it is important to think about why we should even care about cultural transformation in the context of technological change. And I've heard people refer to culture as the soft side of organizations, but research really shows that culture-related practices like increasing employee involvement throughout the technology implementation and change process, it can really help organizations harness and increase the productivity improvements that you can see from technology implementations. So I'll be talking a little bit later on about some actual tactics and practices that you can use to increase employee involvement. But right now, I just want to hit on the ways that the benefits of employee involvement are actually channeled. So employee involvement increases communication, both up and down the organizational hierarchy. And it can bring worker knowledge, information, and creativity to bear on all of these organizational or production-related issues that you're thinking about as a management team. And when information is in turn shared down the hierarchy, workers are made aware of the rationale of leaders in making some of these changes, so it can bring some goal clarity to your workforce. And the second way that it creates benefits is through just a decreased resistance to change. So when workers feel consulted about changes that are being made, they're more likely to trust the organization, and they're more likely to perceive that they have some control over what's happening in their day-to-day. But employee involvement isn't just helpful during technological change. As Mike talked about just now, culture has to be intentionally built and reinforced every day, and it really has to complement your operational processes. So I'll get into some tactics again later, but I just want to introduce one other concept that's been researched called relational coordination. And this is simply coordinating work through relationships of shared goals, shared knowledge, and mutual respect. And research has shown that organizations with a high level of relational coordination outperform those in their industry that have low relational coordination. And this is becoming more and more important because with today's challenges and complex problems that organizations are facing, the tasks of your different employees are really interdependent. And relational coordination is just one way to think about how to build your capacity for high quality communicating and relating in order to integrate tasks across the organization. So just real quick, one way that you can think about where your organization stands in terms of this, think about what you would hear if you asked members of each work group the extent to which other groups understand what they do and have the same goals as they do and respect what they do. So if you can think about some of the answers that you might get, you can start to think about whether change might be needed in your organization or where you stand on these kind of cultural issues.
Thanks, Jenna. Well, that's really helpful to think about. And it kind of leads into another topic that we're going to discuss, which is really around goal setting. And, Jenna talked about how, it's really important that, effective teams really have a shared set of goals and that they understand kind of what the vision is so that they can really coordinate and work together. And so to that end, I'd like to ask Mike a little bit about goal setting. And, when they initially, Mike, when you initially really started considering an IoT platform, what goals were you hoping to achieve and what really made MachineMetrics come out on top of the choices that you had?
Well, in our environment on the shop floor, it's all about velocity, right? It's finding issues, opportunities for improvement and making those improvements. And the quicker you can get that done, the better you're going to be and the better you're going to be able to serve your customer. So we followed the machine monitoring development over many years and knew at some point that we'd like to adopt the technology. And finally, MachineMetrics came out with their software that we adopted, and I'll get to that a little later in the webinar. But we were after a few things: tracking the process, identifying those opportunities for improvement, making that visible to our engineering team, our quality team, our production team, and having those issues resolved and improvements made faster. So above and beyond that, the ability to track additional data, whether it was, downtime, tool monitoring, other areas that we could gather data, analyze it, and again, drive process improvement, drive cost reduction, drive better performance to your customer. And, you know, our customers aren't looking to pay us more every day. They're looking to pay us less, right? So the only way we can survive as a company is by making process improvements and doing things better and more efficiently. And that's really the reason we looked at the IoT platform and chose MachineMetrics.
As you guys can hear, the goal setting didn't come after the purchase of the system. It really was part of what drove the decision making around the platform, and what the needs were of the AccuRounds team, and who could really support them. And I think it's important, even in the work that we do within the customer success department, I can tell you that when you have clear goals and objectives, even if they're high level, but understanding, how you want digital transformation to impact your business is really important, and is really the initial step is doing some of that high level goal setting. So once goals are kind of set, really the projects move into another phase, which is really the preparation phase, and getting ready to introduce a new technology, and thinking about the impact that it's going to have on the team and on the business. So Mike, when you're introducing new processes, new technologies, not just MachineMetrics, but there's always a potential for clash with your team, and for them to, maybe resist whatever improvements are being made. Did you have any fears about that in rolling out the new tech, rolling out MachineMetrics or other new technologies? And, and if so, what were some of those fears?
Well, technology always brings concerns, right? First and foremost, do we have as a company the knowledge and understanding of the technology we're going to implement, be it software or hardware? Do we have the resources to take advantage of the technology that we're introducing? Will it be accepted by our team? Will they embrace the technology? Will they see the benefit as we see the benefit? Will it ultimately work? And when we were first introduced to MachineMetrics, and right when they launched, when Eric Fogg was out visiting companies, and I met him at some trade show, I wasn't convinced we were ready for it, and I wasn't convinced that MachineMetrics had what we ultimately hoped to take advantage of from a software platform. So it probably was a good 3 or 4 years before we ended up entering into a partnership with MachineMetrics, and I think we saw them develop over the years. We were more ready as a company and had a more established team and resources to accept it. I think what we liked about MachineMetrics, not only is it a Massachusetts-based company, which is nice, the open architecture approach, and the team. I felt the team at MachineMetrics was a good match for us. So, those fears kind of diminished. 4 or 5 years ago, we weren't ready. It was wow, this, hopefully we can learn how to use this someday. To, okay, we're ready. It's time. Let's move forward.
Yeah, that transition that you describe of kind of this process of getting ready, and that it's, for a lot of businesses, it's a very intentional act, and it should be. And that, sometimes it is important for organizations to kind of understand their readiness to take this on, and to kind of address that, or to think about those impacts before. And in every customer's preparation is a little different, but I think that the themes that you just elaborated on, Mike, are very true of a lot of customers, and timing is often very key around this, and thinking about that. And so kind of continuing with that theme, I've got some questions for Jenna. So you can hear, Mike talking about how, the preparation and the thoughtfulness around this really started quite a ways back, even before, really figuring out, who the partner was going to be. So can you talk a little bit about, when an organization should really start to address some of those cultural shifts? Is it before the implementation? Is it along with the implementation? Is it both? And what are some recommendations that you would have around kind of getting going with this planning phase?
Yeah, I mean, Stacy, the short answer is all the time and every day, and much earlier than most organizations do start to think about culture. AccuRounds has done this very well, but many organizations find themselves in the left side of this diagram in this kind of traditional sequential process, and not more in the integrated approach on the right side. So just to walk through this diagram really quickly, back to the left, many organizations begin by assessing capabilities of the new technology. And then they retrain and rebalance the workforce in a reactive way after they understand what the technology can do and after they introduce it. And importantly on this side, vendors and top managers tend to define the technology solutions, while HR managers kind of over on their other silo think about the workforce. And that does not always work well. So in contrast, the integrative approach, which is on the right side, this is a much more desirable approach if you can pull it off. So here, the capacities of new technologies are considered side by side with workforce strategies and with overall business strategies. And the workforce is continually engaged in the process. Training can be multidimensional and sometimes even led by workers, which I'll talk about more in a few minutes. And then crucially over here, HR and the workforce actually help define the problem and the options for solutions and any adjustments to the workforce that need to take place. And this can be easier to do in a smaller organization when you're naturally having conversations across those silos more frequently. But what my research is suggesting is there's also some great opportunities now that we have these new flexible, networked, cloud-based technologies like MachineMetrics. As Mike said, even his executive team, much less the operators, didn't really understand exactly what this would look like to implement a machine monitoring system. And that's true for many organizations. You may not be experts in these technologies and may not know all of the kind of intended and unintended consequences after implementation. But now that technologies are more flexible, it provides ongoing opportunities for engaging the workforce even long after implementation. So this makes it easier to think about this integrated model. Mike said it's important to manage the culture on a daily basis and not just upfront and in the first few years or for few months after implementation. AccuRounds is several years nearly into the MachineMetrics installation, and I can tell you that his team is still actively reinforcing how the use of MachineMetrics really interacts with and supports the culture in the organization.
Oh, thank you for that. And I think we probably all can reflect on probably experiences we've had with this traditional approach, because it's probably the most common one that we've had, which is we kind of implement and then figure out kind of the organizational pieces after. And I think, what Jenna's research and what Mike's experience are really suggesting is that, when you have a strategy that is well laid, where it really thinks about all the different inputs and outputs that technology is going to, impact, including the workforce, that you wind up in a much better process. And that process then also helps sustain itself, which can be exciting. So thinking, Mike, about sort of MachineMetrics and your installation in particular, and this is a picture actually from the AccuRounds shop floor with an operator. This operator's out at the machine, and then the gentleman who is on the left-hand side there is one of the engineers. And so Mike, how did you really prepare your team for the rollout? And what were some of the biggest challenges that you might have had? And what did your team say about the installation and where their perspective was on the challenges compared to maybe what you saw from your role?
Well, we were coming from a paper system where we actually tracked machine performance kind of by hand on an hourly basis, did some math, collected sheets, entered it into a computer, put it in a pivot table, created charts and data, and that was pretty laborious, right? And the data was always a day late at best. So we did that for a while. So they were familiar with some of, the process tracking that we did in years past. But, obviously there's a new technology, right? Tablets and digital. And so, we talked it up, before we implemented it. We showed them some slide decks on what to anticipate, what it would look like. Always the initial reaction, I think this is just human nature, that, why all of a sudden you're tracking what I'm doing? And we had that experience when we launched the paper system several years ago. So the reinforcement that this is a tool to help make everyone's jobs easier, better, serve the customer better, just needs to be reinforced. So it's a changing of the dialogue that we had started and need to continue. So there was some resistance, but the fact that the collaboration and transparency was there and they saw it, and there's nobody that's necessarily going after them individually for what may be happening with the process, but it's more of delving into the 5 whys, utilizing the tools and data that's right at the machine real time, that allows us to dig and get some answers. So, we started small too, and I think that helps. And you want to start with where you hope to get better performing processes that are going to show some early wins. So going that route, we kind of mitigated some of the potential challenges that we were faced with. But as we started to implement, and you see colors that may not be green and you get a red or an orange, and that can create some anxiety, right? Why aren't I green and I'm going to get in trouble? And that's not the case. And again, reinforcing that and having them ask the questions, or whatever the dialogue may be coming from an engineer, a machinist, and having that back and forth. And then when they realize, what, okay, I'm getting assistance faster and I'm getting my issues resolved quicker, maybe this is going to be a good tool for me. So the challenges weren't as great if we hadn't had the paper system years ago, but again, they still were intimidating because you had the touchscreens and the tablets of the machine, but we overcame it, and it was, I think, a little smoother than we anticipated it to be.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think, it's always interesting, what people's fears are kind of going into a project like this versus kind of the reality. And I think, as Mike was describing, being very intentional and explaining, what it's replacing or what it's taking off of their plate, or how their different roles, speaking specifically about operators, but, whether that's operators or engineers or really anyone who's touching your processes, trying to overcome challenges both verbally, but also letting them really experience it for themselves and to kind of see what it's like and to make their own decisions and judgments. And I think, Mike's point also of starting in an area where you can get some early wins to really get that buy-in is key, and something I've seen with other customers as well. But I'd also like to get Jenna's thoughts on this. Really from a an organizational behavior perspective, or from some of your research, how would you say organizations should approach overcoming challenges in adopting new technologies? And what are some strategies that AccuRounds maybe used, but maybe some other ones that are out there as well, of how to go about this?
Yeah, so I'm going to jump back to this concept of relational coordination that I talked about a little bit earlier. And that's really just a way to think about your culture and your organizational processes kind of complementing one another. So if you look at the gray box in the middle here, that's just a reminder that relational coordination is really about shared goals, shared knowledge, and mutual respect. And if you follow over to the box to the right of that one, this just shows that this really high levels of relational coordination lead to the outcomes that everyone is interested in, from productivity to worker engagement. And the other 3 boxes in this model are ways that you can think about creating change in order to improve your level of relational coordination. So I'd be willing to bet that most of this audience is familiar with lean management practices, and that's sort of what the bottom right box is all about. Sometimes managers think that developing practices like quality circles will automatically improve their culture because their teams are engaging in a new way. And it's a start, but the bottom left box really draws our attention to the relational interventions and practices that you can use to supplement the more process-related improvements. And what's important about the relational interventions is that this isn't just about building personal relationships between different individuals in your company. It's not about who likes who. It's more about thinking through how the different roles in the company relate to one another. So thinking about how you can structure those roles to increase shared knowledge, goals, and mutual respect across your work groups. And at AccuRounds, some of that comes from really simple things like the engineers and the production managers, and even Mike walking the floor frequently, multiple times a day, even if all of the data that they think they need is available on the MachineMetrics dashboard, for instance. It's really getting out on the floor and having those one-on-one conversations to get some more kind of fine-grained information and make those personal connections. And stepping away from this diagram for another minute, another way to do this that AccuRounds did not do, but it's a strategy that's been studied across different industries, is by designating technology champions, or what's called super users. And it's really just what it sounds like. These are frontline workers who act in a leadership role around a new technology. So super users can do things like make suggestions about how to improve the technology system and its rollout. They can work with trainers to develop and lead sessions for their coworkers. They can communicate and justify information from leadership to coworkers, and just provide just-in-time support to coworkers during and after implementation. So designating super users could be one way to promote both this level of employee involvement that I talked about and this increased relational coordination. And just one last box that I haven't talked about yet in the upper left, that's titled structural interventions. The point that I want to make here is that you could have all the super users you want, and you could have your engineers walking the floor all you want, but you won't see the gains that you could see from that if you don't also consider the employment relationship at a bit of a higher level. So by this, I mean that you just really need to demonstrate in a credible way to your employees that they have some level of employment and wage security, for instance, and your HR practices, from how you hire and train to how you design the jobs, need to align with everything else that you're doing. So AccuRounds has done some of that by really just repeating the core values and the message that no one is going to lose their job because of new technology. It's also through things like their profit sharing model, which has been in place long before the MachineMetrics installation. And that's just more evidence to the employees there that they really care about the workforce, and that the messages that they're receiving and all of the interventions that they're undergoing are really trying to support that overall message of supporting the workforce.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because, so much focus in recent years has been spent on, lean and continuous improvement. And certainly I'm one of those folks myself. And I think that really what this model, that you're showing here, Jenna, is really illustrating is that the missing component in a lot of those is the people, and how people, people have feelings, and people have other ways that they interact. And that can, it's different than just setting out a process. People have to be very intentionally worked with. And it's exciting to see really how AccuRounds has been able to do that, and how they really haven't had to, they've been able to take initiatives like what you were describing around profit sharing and just tie them to these more modern metrics, as opposed to the manual side. But nonetheless, the employees have that consistency through, and different ways that these challenges can really be overcome. So in terms of, AccuRounds in particular, I want to kind of dive a little bit into some of like the secret sauce of sort of what Mike and his team have really built at AccuRounds. So, Mike, what else have you done to really leverage MachineMetrics to support and transform, your culture? And, in what ways maybe did it reinforce the culture you already had? And, are there new ways that it's really kind of helped transform your culture?
Well, the MachineMetrics platform really is a tool that allows us to help explain business at a higher level to our team. So we have a couple of continents we talk about here on a regular basis. One is competence, clarity, alignment, and accountability. So, you want to start with competence, meaning talent. You want to have talent throughout the company. And then clarity and alignment, I mentioned earlier, those are, you're always working to create that. And when you have a dynamic environment, such as the job shop contract advanced manufacturing world, that's constantly changing. So that's a daily work in progress. But only when you have a sense of clarity and alignment can you hold people accountable. And MachineMetrics, the platform here, helps us do that. And it also creates clarity at a much higher level. To pick up on some of Jenna's comments, you start with core values, core purpose, core values. Then you have goals, you have strategies, you have tactics, you have metrics, then you have rewards. And sometimes it's not easy for a machinist or other people in the organization that may have not been taught in the business environment how that all links together. And Jenna mentioned our profit sharing, gain sharing program. Ultimately, this tool is going to hopefully put more money in everyone's pocket because we're going to be more efficient. We're going to be more successful. It's going to make AccuRounds perform better, which ultimately makes their earning power better. And at the end of the day, everybody wins, the customer and our team members. And that's why we're in business, right? To take care of the customer and most importantly, to take care of our team. So, this tool has really created another level of dialogue. Jenna mentioned, I'm on the floor on a daily basis when I'm in the office and, able to interact with our team and I'm learning. It's a learning tool for me because, I'm learning about the process just like our team is learning about the process. So it's been really exciting. And at the end of the day, what we want is more engagement, a high level of engagement. And really this tool gives us the opportunity to do that. And honestly, we've been, almost 2 years since we started with 10 machines and a year since we added 13, we're at 23. And we're still scratching the surface. There's still so much more that this MachineMetrics platform has to offer from a data standpoint that we're really excited to continue to grow and learn and provide our team with more information to make their jobs better, faster, easier.
Yeah, it's exciting to hear how, even 2 years into your journey, you guys are really uncovering still opportunities to leverage more and to get more return on the investment that you've made. And I think you guys have had a great return on your investment so far, but to continue to be able to do that and to how that journey evolves over time is definitely exciting. And I thought what you were mentioning about how having the data, especially for the operators and other folks that may not be as familiar with the business practices, has also given opportunity to really elevate the knowledge that people have about how their role fits into that bottom line and what some of those metrics mean and how that really translates into the business side of what you guys do. And I think it's so important for the team to be knowledgeable about that so that they know kind of the impact that they make as an individual, but also, really the whole that they're a part of. And so, no, that's really exciting. So, so Mike, you, as you mentioned, are a couple of years into this journey and certainly you guys have done a lot of things really right about the way that you've gone about things. So, what's some advice that you would give folks that are either considering, starting their journey with MachineMetrics or maybe are in the earlier stages or, trying to determine, how this really fits into their team?
Well, you got to make sure you're ready. Make sure you're right. It's right for you. That doesn't mean you have to understand a code either, right? I mean, we certainly didn't have all the answers when we decided to make the decision to implement MachineMetrics. So, but that's first and foremost. And I mentioned we weren't ready years ago, and then we were ready. Start small, right? And start in an area where hopefully you're going to have some successes to celebrate. And celebrate those successes, and also celebrate some of the failures. It's okay to fail. You learn from failures, right? We talk at AccuRounds that it's okay to fail, but we don't want to make mistakes, and we define mistakes as failures repeated. So if we can poke and error-proof from those failures, then we won't make mistakes. So celebrate the wins, look for those opportunities to learn, and then just continue to communicate communicate the benefits and what you're seeing, the results, the return on investment. It's just a constant. You just can't say things and then walk away and expect it to be understood and known and remembered. Life just doesn't happen that way, regardless of what your job role is. So you've got to keep it at the forefront. It's a huge database of information, and you want to make sure that you're utilizing it on a daily basis.
Well, thank you for that. So, you know, we've been talking about kind of organizational change and as sort of at a high level, but something that's kind of, I guess, a side topic to that is really what's different about introducing technology compared to maybe other types of organizational or cultural change. And so, Jenna, I'm hoping that maybe you can speak to that a little bit about really what's different about tech and you know, what should folks know about that in particular versus maybe other types of changes that their organizations have undergone.
Yeah, I want to leave you with this preliminary finding from what I've been seeing at AccuRounds. And the relational coordination model that I've been talking about throughout the webinar here, it considers shared knowledge to be knowledge about how the work gets done. And everyone could certainly benefit from knowing as much as possible about other people's roles in the organization. But my research is suggesting that shared knowledge means something a little bit different when it comes to technology and workplace culture. And it really is about these new flexible digital technologies like MachineMetrics that can be continually kind of customized and improved and changed. And so workers, your frontline workforce who are actually the end users of this technology really need to know how the technology works and what about it can be changed in order for them to make useful suggestions. So some things they will figure out through use. AccuRounds as an example, Mike's operators, they know that the downtime categories on the tablets can be changed, and they've made some suggestions to improve the categorization around downtime, but they may not know that other features about MachineMetrics can be changed, like what notifications or flags can be created and how those might lead to process improvements. And they might have useful suggestions about that if they're asked. So strategies to increase kind of worker knowledge, perhaps like designating super users, which is one of the strategies that I talked about earlier. That can be one way to increase worker knowledge around new technologies. And the last thing I'll leave with is just a point that I've made throughout here. It's really important with technology, with other types of organizational change, that you think about cultural transformation in relation to other areas of your business, anything from job design to compensation to process flow. All of these things are really complementary and work together in a system. So you can't just change one thing in a silo and expect everything else to remain unaffected.
Well, that's really helpful. And, you know, it's helpful to think about, you know, just how I think your point around, you know, what level of knowledge do people need to have so that they can even make meaningful suggestions and feel part of it. And I think for each organization that may be a little different, but thinking about that base knowledge that people really need or strategies like super users and other things. And we've certainly seen customers do that model as well. But, you know, I think it's really important to know kind of what foundation needs to be there so that people, you know, really can introduce technology effectively and how it can be a great tool for their workforce. So, so kind of getting back to AccuRounds in particular, you know, we've talked really about what has happened, you know, kind of the introduction of the product to that team and sort of what they've been able to do with it up to this point. But let's talk a little bit about maybe what the future holds, Mike. You know, what do you see, you know, on the horizon for AccuRounds, and how do you see MachineMetrics and the technology really fitting into that vision of where you're going?
Well, first and foremost, we're having another machine being delivered in December. So I guess we'll be connecting another tablet. So growth just from that standpoint is pretty simple. You know, I have a screen in my office and I'm able to view the activity in the floor and the tiles. You saw the slide earlier, which the screen from the engineering room. And unfortunately, you know, every day we have gray tiles, and gray tiles typically mean that the machine isn't running because we don't have an operator, not because we don't have work. So, our goal is to be 100% green, and we hope to get there sooner than later. But the data that's being generated, as I mentioned, we're scratching the surface here. So, the future may mean for us at some level, we're going to have the need, and we do now, and we need to develop the talent to analyze that data, right? So do we hire a data analytics person? Do we train multiple team members to analyze our data that, again, can produce information that's going to make us more efficient? So that's a potential that MachineMetrics can push us in. But, understanding and continuing to learn the advantages of MachineMetrics and learning the enhancements that are continual with MachineMetrics. Along with, we're integrating automation, robotics, 3D printing, on top of the big data. So technology is ever changing in our industry. It's really exciting, but it's also really challenging because everybody's learning a lot of new stuff, and we have to learn it quickly so we can implement it effectively. So utilizing the tool, continuing the collaboration, leveraging labor. Now this will hopefully help us leverage our labor, not eliminate labor, but be able to do more without having to add as much talent that just doesn't exist on the streets. We're in a high-cost country, we're in a high-cost state, but we're surviving and thriving because of tools like MachineMetrics that allow us to be more efficient. So continuing to train our new team members on what the tablets are telling them, diving into the details with our engineers and some of our senior leaders on the floor. So again, we can analyze data and provide our team members information to make them make change and continuous improvement at each and every machine. So we're excited on what MachineMetrics has done and what it can do going forward.
We're excited too, and thank you for that, Mike. And and obviously in conjunction with what Mike was describing about kind of what's going on within AccuRounds, MachineMetrics is also continuing to innovate on the product and the feedback around more actionability, more drawing more actionability from data. And I think that you'll see that that's a theme that we'll be focused on kind of in the coming months ourselves as well. So just to kind of wrap up, really want to kind of celebrate really some of the key metrics and wins that the AccuRounds team has really been able to achieve, using the platform. And so, the results really speak for themselves. So, a 20% overall increase in OEE, reductions in tooling spending, and Mike, I don't know if you want to talk about it, how you actually how the product helped you do some of these, but reducing past dues, taking that past due backlog down significantly, which obviously had an increase in on-time delivery as an outcome of that as well as the great turnover rate. And that, I think, really speaks to the culture of AccuRounds, but also some of the insights that that maybe we've been able to provide. So I don't know, Mike, if you want to speak to any of these in particular.
Just a couple quick points. I mean, obviously OEE is the key number here, right? And that's what we're after, improved performance, and we're seeing that. But I think one of the benefits we maybe didn't anticipate at the outset is the tooling spend. So by tracking the process, you're identifying some issues with tooling quicker, and we're also able to do some R&D and some new tooling. So tooling's a big ticket item when you do the multitude of materials that we machine, and from inserts to end mills to drills to all sorts of different types of carbide tooling. To be able to reduce that spend by the amount we have has been very impressive, which ultimately can return some money back into our team's pockets, which is really the goal here. So we're pleased what we've seen to date. We know there's some more wins to come down the road. But something that's not on this slide that's probably most important here is we've increased the trust, and we've improved collaboration, and we've made our entire company more transparent. And those things are very, very important to me as an owner. It falls in line with our core values, and the better job we're doing at the outset with those behaviors, then it's just going to enhance some of these improvements even more down the road. So I've been thrilled, excited, and looking forward to continuing to utilize MachineMetrics and have our team grasp it and take hold of it and run with it.
Well said. Thank you, Mike. And thank you both for participating today and really being part of this panel discussion. And I agree that, sometimes these hard metrics that we focus so much on in business, sometimes those intangible metrics, those people metrics and culture metrics are a little harder to measure, but nonetheless are really just as important, and they go towards achieving these bottom line increases as well. So, just want to thank you both for being part of the panel today, and we're going to turn things over for a little bit of Q&A. So, Colin, if you want to jump in and start fielding some questions from our attendees today, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks, Stacy. So we really got time for one question today, and if your question wasn't answered, we are going to follow up with you after the webinar via email, so don't worry about it. But this one's for you, Jenna. In your work with AccuRounds, what kind of creative suggestions from operators did you receive on kind of how to enhance MachineMetrics? Touched upon this a little bit earlier, and wonder if you could talk a little bit more about it.
Sure. So part of my research involved shadowing Mike's machinists and engineers. And one of the young machinists in particular, I remember, I told Mike this story too. His name is Nick. And during a tool change on one of the machines, he said that the way that he used MachineMetrics was to time himself. So he said he started doing the tool change at 9 minutes, and he ended up getting down to 7 minutes and 30 seconds just by doing these really simple things like putting his hands in different places when he was pressing buttons on the machine to do the tool change. And so I asked him whether he had shared this with anyone else. He said, no, it's just kind of this game I play with myself. And so even just suggestions like that about how to think about how to use the tablet in their minute by minute work could be really useful to share with others in the organization. And then more formally, this was actually during a visit by some MachineMetrics representatives, but they went around and talked to a couple of the machinists about what they liked and what they didn't like about the system. And some of the engineers came along, and I also followed and heard some of the feedback that they gave. And a couple of the operators actually suggested it'd be really useful for them to get some data on prior runs. So if they could dig into the tablet and go to a new screen that had like a histogram of prior runs, that would be useful to them. It would help with shift changes and learning patterns and what time of day do they do their best work, and remembering what happened during a past job if a supervisor comes by and has questions. And so it's just important to have those channels of feedback, and MachineMetrics and AccuRounds have those, and then they can take that feedback into account when they're developing new features. So companies can think about doing things like this, like just having these quick check-ins with your people. What do they like? What do they not like? It's not really, it doesn't have to be centered around a particular problem that you're having, but just a really open-ended, quick conversation can be really fruitful.
Great, yeah, thank you. Like I said, we only had time for that one question, so I want to hand things back over to Stacy, but we will be following up with you on any other questions that were submitted after the webinar. So back to you, Stacy.
Yeah, so along with today's webinar, we actually have put out in conjunction with AccuRounds, and Jenna was a contributor to this as well, actually a case study that goes deeper into really the AccuRounds journey and really a lot of the topics that we were talking about today. And I really welcome everybody to take a look at it. It's really a great piece, and it has a number of different voices within the shop floor really represented. And so definitely a piece that that we're very proud of, and thank you AccuRounds and Jenna for your participation and help putting that together. So please go and check out the new case study. Also, I wanted to make folks aware of our next webinar that's going to be coming up. This webinar will be done in conjunction with AWS, Amazon Web Services, and Autodesk. And it's going to be on, another panel discussion, but on driving rapid value and innovation with industrial IoT. And so please join us for that later in the month, and that's open for registration at this point. And just to wrap up again, thank you so much for everyone who attended today and for joining us. And please let us know if you'd like the access to the recording or to the slides. And please, everyone, just a big thank you again to Mike Tomasi and Jenna Myers for joining us today and for all the great work that you guys are doing. So thank you so very much.
Thank you, Stacy.
All right.
Thanks, Stacy.
Well,
Thanks, everyone.
everybody have a great rest of the day, and thank you for joining us. And we look forward to having you at another upcoming webinar.